In the late autumn, Mr. Hussein paid one of his regular visits to the Alfwyhat Teacher Training Center, which is part of the adult education program of UNESCO. Hussein's enthusiasm, his humility, and the degree of his involvement with the Libyan people came out in the style of his reports.
My work in Tripoli had prevented a personal visit to Alfwyhat since September, and my welcome, possibly for this reason, seemed even more cordial than usual. It was most pleasant to see the Libyan director, Mr. Mahmoud Shuaidi, now taking his rightful place in full command of the center, and to meet also Mr. Atare, the UNESCO team leader, and his colleagues, who had all helped to bring this about. Each UNESCO man is now working in double harness with his Libyan counterpart, the man who will ultimately take over. For it's in the nature of the UNESCO expert that ultimately he should do himself out of a job and be ready to move on to a new job elsewhere.
Later in his report, Hussein quoted the two main reasons why students come here.
They come here to train, both as teachers and as leaders of their communities. They can never learn too much, and they never want to stop learning. Alfwyhat is 5 kilometers east of Benghazi, which is itself 1,000 kilometers east of Tripoli, still some 14 hours by road, but only 50 minutes by jet. Most of the trainees come from small villages, some of them hundreds of kilometers away. And not only the trainees, but their villagers take great pride in the fact that they were chosen. The more I saw of Mr. Shuaidi in his office, the more I felt he has justified our faith in him. He was first noticed when he was being trained by Alfwyhat, the Arab States Fundamental Education Center.
The boys at Alfwyhat were being trained in order to teach others. And to teach people, you begin where they are, with the things that are important to them.
Their timetable includes a great proportion of agricultural studies, and in Libya, this is right and fitting. The Alfwyhat trainee, like the Libyan farmer, learns to make best use of the hot, dry climate. But as well as inheriting centuries of skill, the Alfwyhat trainee gets from the UNESCO experts the refinement of modern scientific methods adapted to his needs.
Since even poultry houses need a new coat of whitewash occasionally, the Alfwyhat trainee is shown the right and wrong way to hold a brush, as well as all the more everyday skills of the poultryman. He learns to grow vegetables and fruits, like olives, which are already part of the country's economy, although modern methods of pruning, using modern tools, show him how to get better results. The Alfwyhat students are enormously keen to learn. They know that when the time comes to return home, their friends back in the villages will expect to learn from them. And one even sees, in the Libyan setting of the camp, the Martian uniforms of the beekeeper. In the preserving department, the honey taken from these bees is put into jars and stored for later use.
Classroom teaching, or the open-air equivalent, is not allowed to act as a drag on practical experience, and the boys have the pleasure of seeing where everything leads. They help to grow their own food. They make in one class many of the benches and tools they will need in another. They never think of themselves as privileged because they are teachers. Their privilege is to help others, and the more they learn, the more they can teach.
The trainee is also shown how other vegetables, possibly in specially grown strains, can be successfully cultivated in Libya and preserved. He's taught that these new varieties will not only provide a change in the familiar diet, but also supply vitamins specially necessary in a hot climate.
In the Girls' Center, 2 kilometers along the road, our UNESCO expert, Miss Nazima Bastawi, is helping to bring Libyan women and girls some of the advantages of modern household skills. It's of the greatest comfort to me not only to see how naturally the teaching fits into the local setting, but to see the subtlety with which this is done.
Every few days, the senior agricultural instructor, Mr. Taha, leaves the Alfwyhat Center to give the girls simple lessons in horticulture. He also brings seeds and seedlings for them to pass on to their fathers and brothers. His visit is a happy example of cooperation between several agencies of the United Nations. They are supported by the local FAO men, and it's a UNICEF vehicle which brings them back.
The younger girls and children from other schools nearby are given regular access to the Alfwyhat Center library. In this, and a number of other ways, the advantages that the trainees derive from the Alfwyhat Center are shared.
Later, my chief, John Bowers, told me about a visit he'd paid to the Alfwyhat Center.
I had a long talk with all the instructors to get their ideas about what they were doing. I was shown round the carpentry and handicraft section run by Mr. Zalatimo. He was teaching the trainees to make the simple furniture and equipment that they would need in their own schools and villages. In the next section, Mr. Karam, who had been trained on a UNESCO fellowship in Europe, was teaching them pottery. I thought their equipment was rather luxurious and encouraged them to teach their students with the tools and potter's wheels they would get in the Libyan villages. In a line of converted Nissen huts, where the boys live, one of the huts was pointed out to me as the mosque. It looked like all the other huts, except for the prayer mats inside and the sign on the door. The administrative officer of the local Nazaret of Education went with me on tour. He was a most cultured man who has done much for the centre, Mr. Hana Kajan. I tried to make my visit as informal as possible, and with the combination of his excellent English and my rusty Arabic, we managed to get our questions asked and answered. The teaching aids section, under Mr. Suleiman, was training the boys to use simple silkscreen printing so that they could make posters and notices for their village schools. It was good to see that they had also made use of their own kind of homemade puppets. This was in the same room as the more modern devices, like film strip projectors, tape recorders, and epidioscopes. Alfwyhat has a small radio outfit which gives the students practice in handling educational broadcasting and sends out music and announcements over the area of the centre.
Bowers told me about the section here in Paris which handles relations with member states. It's their job to keep us informed about conditions in the member states, to explain what they need, and to advise us what is possible. Just as in Libya, it was part of Hussein's job to handle day-to-day relations with Libyan government officials like the Federal Minister of Education, Mr. Mohammed Bishti, and the Provincial Minister, the Nasser. The meeting, like every other meeting in Libya, was characterized by great courtesy. The Minister and the Nasser expressed their satisfaction at the practical results of the cooperation between the Libyan government and UNESCO. And they all spoke of the intention to develop Alfwyhat from a provincial into a national center for the training of teachers and community leaders. Soon after the conversation had begun, there was a traditional offering of tea or coffee. On the main wall of the room, the portrait of the ruling king, Idris I. Mr. Hussein went on to say that he told the minister and the Nasser how hard the boys of Alfwyhat were working outside the center, in the club in Alfwyhat village, for instance. Until the boys, under Mr. Atari, helped the local people to organize this club, there was no center for communal meeting and refreshment. It was in its way as valuable to the community as the work done by young Alfwyhat trainees in teaching working people at regular evening classes. Here, Hussein was reminded that if you're going to have evening classes, you've got to be able to see the blackboard.
It was pleasant to watch electric light flickering like candles, but it would take a lot to distract the class, whose members are there because they want to learn and whose teachers are conscious only of being able to help.
On my last morning, before returning to Paris, I went out to a village with a Alfwyhat graduate. He took me to meet a farmer whom he had taught to read and write. The friendliness between the two was most encouraging. We gave the young teacher his training and his start. Now we must support him in Alfwyhat, Tripoli, Paris. We must make him feel that he can still count on us for help. At Alfwyhat, we are not just training teachers, we are encouraging communities to help themselves and each other.
Here was what I had wanted, tangible evidence of UNESCO in action. After studying the reports of Hussein, Bowers and others, after on my part only a vicarious experience of the Alfwyhat Centre, my work at UNESCO really began to make sense.